I heard the splash before I heard Jenna say it. A hollow, shocked sound that came from the pool like someone had knocked on glass. Then the wet hush of my laptop hitting water, and Jenna's voice sharp and oddly light. "Oh, sorry. I accidentally dropped your laptop in the pool." Everyone leaned in, the way people lean into small disasters at parties so they can be the first to watch the face of the person who owns them. My mouth went dry. The sun was warm on my shoulders, the grill hissed in the background, plastic cups clinked. I felt like I was underwater, hearing every small ordinary noise as if it were far away. That one line, accidentally dropped, sat in the air like an accusation that I couldn't name yet. I looked at her. She was smiling in that small, satisfied way she'd had since she was a teenager. The smile that meant she had just pushed a chess piece and wanted to watch the board collapse. The room was full of family. My chest tightened. 2 months before the party, Jenna had asked me for money. Not a little, not some casual loan. $29,000 for her new business idea. She had a pitch deck she'd printed in glossy paper, a string of buzzwords, and a sparkle in her eye I used to mistake for ambition. I told her no. I told her I couldn't, and I said it without anger. Just that I had my own savings, my own plans, and boundaries I wouldn't cross. She called me cold. She told Mom that I had refused family. She texted me at odd hours, begging, promising, then guilt-tripping. I stayed firm. I had my reasons: savings for a down payment, freelance clients who depended on my files, a half-finished novel on that hard drive. The refusal was a clean line in the sand. I expected whining, maybe a sulk. I expected silence. I didn't expect someone to reach across the table at a crowded pool party and drop my laptop into the water. After all, we were family. Or at least I had always believed we were. If this hits home, tell me where you're watching from in the comments. Your story might be the reason someone else sets a boundary. Growing up in suburban Ohio, family meetings were rules disguised as tradition. You sat where Dad put you. You didn't mention money unless Dad did. You were expected to smile while Cousin Todd's cheap wine flowed and Aunt Linda patted your hand and said, "Family first." I learned early to keep my things in my room and my plans in my head. I learned to be careful with trust. Jenna had always been louder, bolder in a way our parents rewarded with attention. When we were small, she would take the last cookie and grin about it. When we were older, she'd take the spotlight and never look back. I was quieter, methodical, neat. My laptop was my life. It held invoices, drafts, designs, tax forms. It held evidence that I kept for safety: bank statements, contracts, receipts, because you never know when you might have to prove the shape of your life to the world. I should have known better than to leave it near an open table at a family event where someone had already decided I was the easy target. That afternoon was loud with family. Mom fussing with an ill-fitting dress, Dad telling a story about someone's high school grades, cousins splashing by the shallow end. My laptop sat under a folding table, half covered with a paper towel, near my tote bag. I went inside for another drink. When I came back, Jenna was standing by the pool, wet hair pinned up, laughing at something on her phone. She looked at me, made eye contact, and then with a slow motion that made my stomach lurch, she leaned on the table. Her elbow nudged the towel. The laptop slid and tumbled, striking the tile, then falling with a wet, final sound I can still hear. She smiled. "Oh, sorry," she said again, like it was a clumsy accident that needed no apology. My first instinct was disbelief. My second was heat, red and rising. I bent, scooped up the machine, and it was heavy with water. The screen was black as if it had been swallowed. Around me, the noise of the party marched on. No one gasped long enough to suggest they believed it was anything but an accident. I walked to the kitchen with the dead laptop in my arms, and Jenna followed like a predator wanting to hear the sound of my panic. The rest of the afternoon blurred into a bad improv. Jenna told everyone she was clumsy, a laugh with a limbic shrug. Mom told me to be careful with electronics around pools. Dad shrugged and made a joke about technology these days. Jenna turned the moment into a story about fate and bad luck. She took selfies with the soggy machine as if to prove she hadn't deliberately done it. Later in the car, Jenna sent me a text with a crying laugh emoji and, "It was an accident. Stop being dramatic." I felt small and humiliated, as if I were the only one who still cared about the things I owned. But humiliation was only the first cut. When I opened my laptop, at home, with towels and a hairdryer and a pounding heart, it would be worse. And I had a secret that Jenna didn't know. The laptop backed up to the cloud only sometimes, and I hadn't saved everything in months. There were contracts for my freelance work, bank logins I used occasionally for transfers, a folder labeled tax that had everything from the last year. If those files were gone, I might not lose pictures and drafts alone. I could lose my ability to prove I'd been paid, to prove ownership, to protect myself. The possibility of that smaller, quieter devastation hit harder than her smug smile. That night I replayed the argument about 29,000 in my head. Jenna had made a case that was all charm and half-truths. A business partner who needed seed money, a location, the promise of quick returns. She had been clever in the ask. She had told Mom privately that the money would go to us, to the family, to future stability. When I refused, she lost something I hadn't thought she wanted badly. But why destroy my laptop? Later, after I dried the machine and felt its useless weight, I found a text thread between Jenna and a lawyer. Yes, a lawyer, where she had asked about contracts, LLCs, and ways to keep investors happy. She was making moves that needed my silence. My laptop had contracts, proof of work, and a small document I'd written. A letter to our mother showing the truth about how money had been handled in the past. It was there, a careful accounting of favors and loans and who had repaid what. It would make the family look different, and Jenna knew it. The betrayal wasn't just the $29,000 ask. It was that she was willing to erase my evidence to protect her story. I sat in the dark and imagined the folder labeled, Truth, floating somewhere between mud and silence. Anger came, average and bright, and then something colder, calculation. The problem with outrage is that it exhausts you. The problem with silence is it protects the person who started it. I cried for an hour. I then picked up a pen. I made a list. Step 1. Establish what was lost. Step 2. Recover what I could. Step 3. Make it impossible for her to rewrite the story. I called my backup service, and a polite woman named Tamika told me there were 3 sync points from the past 6 months. Not everything was gone. The tax folder, the receipts and invoices, was there, dated and time-stamped. The letter to Mom? It wasn't uploaded, but there were text messages where Jenna had lied about repaying loans and a scanned copy of a bank transfer showing an amount Jenna had claimed was for business but that matched Aunt Linda's name in the ledger. I began to assemble everything into order. I made copies, printed receipts, and opened a new folder labeled for safekeeping. I created a secure drive and started to populate it. No one would know until I chose the right time and the right way. The turning point was when, late that night, I realized pleading with family or posting on social media would be theater. The kind of justice I wanted had to be methodical and clean. It had to be undeniable. The turning point line I still say sometimes. I stopped begging for apologies and started asking for proof. My plan was not dramatic. It was administrative, boring, slow, painfully effective. First, I filed a formal complaint with the Neighbors Association about property damage during the party. There were witnesses who could confirm the timeline. Second, I contacted my bank and my clients to secure any accounts that might be at risk if personal info had been on the laptop. They appreciated the heads-up. I changed passwords and requested transaction histories. Third, I collected everything Jenna had left lying around. Emails she'd sent from our shared family account, receipts for purchases she'd claimed were business-related but that matched family vacations, and messages where she'd promised to repay money to Mom but had never done so. I compiled photocopies, timestamps, and screenshots. Fourth, and most importantly, I met with a small consumer attorney in the city who specialized in property and small business disputes. We talked about civil remedies, about how to force disclosure without spectacle. "You don't need to humiliate her with drama," she said, kind and direct. "You need to make the facts visible to the people who matter." I hired her to issue a demand letter requesting an accounting of funds related to Jenna's business and any transfers that involved family money. If Jenna refused, we would file for discovery. It sounded formal, like bureaucratic justice, but it was the legal equivalent of turning on a bright light in a room someone wanted to stay in shadow. When the demand letter arrived at Jenna's apartment, she called Mom and laughed, until she saw the date stamped on the paper. A week after the demand letter, Jenna's laughter turned into nerves. Mom called and asked to see me, for a family talk, at the same house where the pool still dried in the sun. I agreed but set conditions. I would come with the attorney. Mom was surprised but agreed. Maybe because the word attorney makes people straighten in their chairs. The day of the meeting, the air smelled like cut grass and cheap perfume. Jenna arrived late, her hair high, a practiced smile welded on. We sat around the dining table where so many small cruelties had been normalized. My lawyer laid out copies of transactions, screenshots of text messages, and a careful timeline of what had happened around the $29,000 request. She asked simple questions. Where did the money go, who had access to the invoices, and why had Jenna refused to provide documentation when requested? Mom read silently. Dad shifted in his chair. Jenna's smile became something thin and brittle. The turning moment came when my attorney slid a printout across the table with a bank transfer line that matched Jenna's story in a way she couldn't explain. The transfer labeled deposit to a business name that didn't exist in public records, and the same amount moved days later to a personal account. Jenna tried to deflect. She said, "I can explain." I let her speak and watched the color leave her face as more documents were set before her. Documents showing that the supposed partner was a friend who had been repaid months before, and messages where Jenna had admitted she was short and needed more time. Mom grew quiet. Family members who had been siding with Jenna started to fidget. The air felt suddenly too small. The laptop incident, which had seemed to be a small, ugly joke, became a piece in a larger pattern. When my lawyer asked for Jenna to provide receipts and contracts within 7 days, the room was full of a new, heavy silence. Jenna had gambled on my shame. I had gambled on evidence. My risk paid off. In the week that followed, Jenna became defensive and, at times, unwell. She posted less on social media. A few mutual contacts messaged me privately. Some angry, some relieved. Aunt Linda sent a text. I had no idea. Dad stopped sleeping in until noon. Mom called me at 3 in the morning to apologize, softly and broken, for not seeing the signs. The lawyer filed a request for account disclosures and we received documents that showed inconsistencies. Missing receipts, payments flagged as personal, and a ledger that didn't match Jenna's story. Jenna eventually returned a partial accounting and a small sum of money with a note that read like a stopgap. Legally, she wasn't in the clear. Socially, her excuses fell apart. People who had once smiled at her at family dances now found reasons to keep conversations short. It wasn't violent, it was worse for her in some ways, exposed, watched, and forced to answer for choices she thought would go unnoticed. I felt no joy in seeing her falter. I felt relief. The laptop's files restored what they could, and the tax folder helped me prove a string of payments from clients that re-established my income timeline. The letter I had once written to our mother, that private accounting of favors and loans, never had to be read aloud. The truth revealed itself in paper and timestamps, and in the slow, practical work of forcing visibility. If you've ever been gaslit by family, I want to hear your story. Share it in the comments. There's power in seeing that we're not alone. Justice, I learned, is not always the loud moment in a courtroom. Sometimes it's a paper trail and a phone call and a neighbor remembering the correct order of events. Jenna paid back some money and agreed to a payment plan for the rest. She agreed to provide receipts and to stop soliciting family for funds. We did not become close in any meaningful way after that. She sent a brief apology, less than 10 words, and then went quiet. The family fractured in small, predictable ways. Some relatives chose to make their peace with me. Others chose to keep the old stories alive. I filed for an official police report about the property damage to the laptop because I wanted a record. It felt small and official, like marking the boundary I had put down months before and refused to let be trampled. I did not pursue criminal charges. I didn't want a headline or a spectacle. I wanted clarity. People should know not to destroy someone else's property and to expect consequences if they do. The plan I put into motion, backup copies, legal pressure, and a quiet reveal, had removed the power from her smug smile and given it back to a careful set of facts. I used to imagine revenge as a movie. Dramatic music, a glorious reveal, a scorched earth ending. The truth was smaller and cleaner. Setting boundaries is not cruel. Sometimes it is necessary. The money I refused to give Jenna was mine to protect. My savings, my future, my life. The laptop she destroyed was a violent breach of trust. The path I chose was not about getting even. It was about restoring rightful order. I could have shouted. I could have broken her illusions the way she broke my machine. Instead, I chose a process that was patient and legal, and that required me to be brave in a different way. To gather, to document, and to wait until the facts could speak. I forgave in public only insofar as I was forced to. But privately I let myself grieve for what had been broken. And I learned how to make sure it could not happen again. The victory was not that she was humiliated. It was that I was able to walk away with my dignity and my life intact. I hope that anyone watching who has been gaslit or shamed by family knows this. You do not have to accept destruction as an inevitability. You can collect your evidence, tighten your accounts, and set a boundary that sticks. If this story moved you, subscribe and tell me your story below. What boundary did you set that changed everything?